non-combustible world. As President Biden emphasized when he was here on Monday, thanks to historic investments at home and around the world, the United States can now operate from a position of greater strength to tackle all of these challenges. Our adversaries and competitors are weaker. Our strategy of renewal to set the stage for America to win the fierce competition, to shape a new era of international affairs to the benefit of our people, to the benefit of people around the world. And I think this week was another reminder, both of the power and the purpose of American leadership and American diplomacy. Over 15 months of devastating conflict between Israel and Hamas, we've worked to broker a deal that would bring hostages home, that would stop the fighting, that would surge humanitarian aid to people who so desperately need it, that would create the space to conclude a permanent ceasefire. We now have that, and we expect implementation of the agreement to begin on Sunday. As President Biden said yesterday, after more than 400 days of struggle, a day of success has arrived. I want to thank our fellow mediators, Qatar and Egypt, for their extraordinary partnership. And I want to thank my colleagues, in particular, Jake Sullivan, Bill Burns, Brett McGurk, for their remarkable skill, tireless dedication over these many months of negotiation.
Will you recognize the Geneva Conventions apply to the Palestinians?
And again, I'm happy to address questions when we have a chance. I'm happy to address questions in a moment. Thank you. This is a moment of tremendous relief for Israelis and Palestinians alike. The daughter of one hostage spoke for many when she said, "I can't wait to see them come back to their families. I'm so desperate to see them." A mother of 5 displaced from Gaza City said simply, "We are being reborn." It's also a moment of historic possibility for the region and well beyond. It's going to take tremendous effort, political courage, compromise to realize that possibility, to try to ensure that the gains that have been achieved over the past 15 months at enormous, excruciating cost are actually enduring, to manage the still profound risks, to deliver on the promise of a more integrated Middle East. And simply put, to forge this reality, there are 2 immediate imperatives. First, to fully implement the ceasefire deal. And then second, to finalize a plan, an effective plan, as I spelled out earlier this week, that provides for Gaza's transitional governance, its security, its reconstruction, and that can make the halt in fighting endure. Delivering on these 2 priorities will in turn create the conditions for Israel and Saudi Arabia to normalize relations between them, which will require a credible pathway to a Palestinian state. On each of these imperatives, we've delivered concrete progress and we've laid a foundation for success, which we will hand over to the incoming administration. Together, they represent a historic opportunity to advance the long-term interests of the United States, our partners in the region, and around the Middle East. In Ukraine as well, we've seen the results of steadfast American leadership. We rallied and kept together some 50 countries to help Ukraine defend itself from Putin's war of aggression. Through Ukrainian courage and also Western resolve and firepower, Ukraine repelled Russia's invasion and took back half the territory it originally seized. We've marshaled commitments from countries around the world that will help Ukraine deter and defend against future attacks and stand on its own feet militarily, economically, democratically. We've also imposed the most ambitious sanctions and export controls ever on Russia, cutting off its biggest banks, reducing dramatically Europe's reliance on Russian energy, oil and gas, almost to zero at this point. As a result of some of our latest sanctions, Russian oil tankers are piling up along the Chinese coast, unable to offload. Ukraine will continue to stand as an independent, democratic nation anchored in the West with the freedom to choose its own future. If we sustain our support for Ukraine, if we continue to exacerbate Putin's growing manpower and economic dilemmas, we can continue to help Ukrainians gain leverage to negotiate a just and secure peace. Now, I got back from what was my 21st trip to the Indo-Pacific in this job just a short while ago, a region where the United States is now competing from a position of strength. We brought our regional allies together, our partners together, around a shared vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific, where goods and ideas and people flow freely, where rules are applied fairly and transparently, where countries are free to choose both their own path and their own partners. We enhanced bilateral relationships with our core treaty allies, with Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Philippines. We forged a new era of trilateral cooperation with Japan and Korea, with Japan and the Philippines as well. We re-energized the Quad with Japan, India, Australia, strengthened our relationships with ASEAN, the Pacific Island countries, elevated partnerships with Vietnam and Indonesia. As the DPRK and the PRC continue to fuel Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine, underscoring how European and Asian security are indivisible, we've also built enduring bridges between our Pacific and Atlantic allies and partners. Australia, Japan, and South Korea have provided important support to Ukraine. In 2021, European allies were on the verge of signing a massive trade agreement with China. Now they're coordinating with us on everything from investment screening mechanisms to supply chain resilience to pushing back on China's overcapacity and unfair trade practices. At the same time, we've managed our competition with China responsibly so it doesn't veer into conflict, while also cooperating on challenges where the world expects great powers to lead and where it's clearly in the interest of the American people, from climate change to fentanyl. We've also demonstrated that other countries can rely on the United States to tackle some of our biggest shared challenges and deliver on some of our own on their own national aspirations, preventing disease outbreaks, enhancing food security, accelerating the clean energy transition, bringing together a global coalition of more than 160 countries to address the synthetic opioid crisis. As we celebrate the return of hostages in Gaza, including Americans, as we look to relief for the people of Gaza, I'm also thinking of all those U.S. citizens who are held wrongfully, who are hostage in countries around the world.
Do you know about
I
the
carried
Hannibal
with me.
Directive? Miller says he doesn't know about the Hannibal Directive.
You can leave,
Do you know
sir.
about the Hannibal Directive?
Again, I'm happy to address questions in a few more minutes. I look forward to answering questions in a few more minutes. Thank you.
Okay, well, let him speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gets to make lots of speeches.
Thank you.
Let him answer some questions.
I look forward to
Let him
answering
answer some
questions. Thank you.
Instead of making another speech every
Sir,
day.
would you like to be escorted out?
Go away.
You don't have the responsibility to tell me where to go. Do you want to be escorted out or not?
I want him
Thank
to
you.
answer questions.
I look forward to answering questions in a minute.
I'm a
Thank you.
journalist. I'm not a potted plant.
Everyone will have an opportunity to ask a question in just a minute. Thank you.
Miller
So-
has explicitly told me he will not answer my questions. I'm justified
So-
in what I'm doing.
I have no greater pleasure in this job than crossing off a list I carry in my pocket, the names of those who had been arbitrarily detained and unfairly held hostage, unjustly held hostage, and bringing them home, returning them to their families, returning them to their loved ones. Finally, I just
your
wanted to
hands
share
off
this
me.
morning.
Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. Answer a damn question.
I look
You
forward to
know about
answering
the
questions in a
Hannibal
few
Directive?
minutes.
You know about Israel's nuclear weapons? Everybody from the ICJ. I was sitting here quietly, and now I'm being manhandled by 2 or 3 people. You pontificate about a free press. You pontificate about a free press. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I am asking questions after being told
Please-
by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions until I'm asking
Please, sir,
questions.
respect the respect the process. We'll have an opportunity to take questions in a few minutes.
Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders? You
Please, sir, respect the process. Thank you.
Oh, respect the process. Respect this process while everybody from Amnesty International, to the ICJ saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination, and you're telling me to respect the process. Criminal, why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague?
Finally, we've worked to modernize our diplomacy so that we're more agile, we're more effective, we're more prepared for the challenges of a new era. We've reorganized this department to lead on issues that increasingly animate our diplomacy, whether it's emerging technology, public health, strategic competition, economic statecraft. We've embraced new tools and approaches, from integrating data and AI into the work that we do, strengthening our capacity to anticipate, to plan for risks, as well as opportunities in this more volatile world. Maybe most important, we've invested in our people, improving our hiring and retention practices, diversifying our workforce, strengthening our training, providing more support to employees throughout their careers. We've hired the largest Foreign Service Officer class in more than a decade, and we've grown our Civil Service Corps at the fastest rate in more than 20 years. It was gratifying to me, and I think to everyone in this department, that among the first and last stops President Biden made in his tenure was right here at the State Department. I think that is powerful evidence of the trust that he placed in us to carry out this country's foreign policy. Our diplomats represent this country with exceptional skill, with professionalism, with heart. They often do so at great personal sacrifice, little fanfare, in some of the world's most challenging environments. It has been, simply put, the greatest of honors to be able to work shoulder to shoulder with them. These past 4 years, there have also been moments of disappointment, of hardship, of heartbreak. But I leave this job knowing that we spent every day thinking about and working toward what we believe is best for our people, the citizens we have the immense privilege of representing. And I'm confident we leave office with our country and with this department in a much stronger position than we found it. And now, with that, one last time, I look forward to taking some questions. Mr. Miller.
Matt, let's start us off.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and thank you for the very opening comments about the work, the cooperation with us, the press corps. Even when we haven't always been satisfied or with the answers, we do certainly appreciate your willingness to engage with us, and so thank you for that. I want to start, actually I only have one question. Exactly 16 years ago today, January 16th, 2009, former outgoing Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice had her final press briefing here. And all of the questions she got were about Israel and Gaza. Every single one of them. And she said, we were working on an enduring ceasefire. She was about to sign an agreement with then Foreign Minister Livni that would move toward that way. She was working with international partners. Names have changed, but countries pretty much the same: Egypt, the Europeans, the Gulf Arab states. And so 16 years ago, we were in the same situation that we're in now, particularly because this ceasefire, current one, still seems to be in limbo. I'm wondering if you can point to any progress that has been made over the course of the Bush administration, the Obama administration. Has there been anything that has changed or given you hope? Because we're basically back in the same position we were 16 years ago.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. This is a long story. It's an enduring story. It's a story that is not likely to end anytime soon. And if you go back over the course of many administrations, not only Secretary Rice, but so many of our predecessors and so many of her successors, and now me, this is a story that we've been engaged in one way or another. And I think each of us has probably brought the conviction to it that we could and should do everything possible to try to get to and write a better conclusion, a good conclusion for the story. And so many of us, for many years, have labored to do just that. I think one of the lessons that we have to take away is that as resourceful and as powerful as we are, at the end of the day, we can't make decisions for others. They have to make them. They have to make hard choices. They have to take chances. We can do everything possible to push, to prod, to encourage, to support, but ultimately the decision lies with those most directly concerned. That's one thing. But the second thing is, and I believe this strongly, there's also no substitute for our engagement, for the efforts that we make in trying to move this forward and get to a better place. And yes, we have absolutely seen both progress and promise. And the question is whether leaders on all sides, but the people behind them will find a way to seize on those opportunities. So, as I laid out in some detail just the other day, when we took office, we were very focused on pursuing greater integration in the region as the real answer to creating more security, more peace, more opportunity for people. Not trying to change individual countries, governments, societies, but bringing them closer together. And before October 7th, we've done a lot of work on this integration, building on the Abraham Accords of the first Trump administration, pointing toward the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And as you all know, we were all planning to go to Saudi Arabia and Israel because we'd made so much progress on the normalization accords on October 10th, a trip that of course didn't happen, to do two things: to try to help finalize agreements that were necessary to get to normalization, and as part of that, to find a clearer way forward, a pathway to a Palestinian state, vital to Saudi Arabia, very important to us as well. Even with everything that's happened since October 7th, I believe strongly, including from my many conversations with leaders in the region, whether it's in Israel, in Saudi Arabia, or beyond, that the desire to pursue integration, the desire to bring countries together, remains strong, remains powerful, and can be a driving force for finally resolving some of these other questions, including the Palestinian question. Israel's deepest desire from day one of its founding was to be treated like any other country in the region, to have normal relations. And it's been demonstrated that that's possible and desired. But it requires, among other things, ending the conflict in Gaza, which we are now on the verge of doing as a result of everything that we have put into this. An agreement that President Biden put forward before the world in May, got the entire world to endorse. And in the months since, we've been working to negotiate the final details and get it implemented, and that's where we are now. So, end Gaza is one, and then yes, a credible pathway to a Palestinian state is two, and leaders will have to summon the vision and the courage to do that. I laid out some ideas for how you can get there just the other day, but I believe that is possible. I believe the driving desire for integration is something that can carry this forward. Finally, I'll say this. We've also seen, as a result of so much of the work that we've done, what the possibilities are. For Israel, when it was attacked in an unprecedented way by Iran, a direct attack with hundreds of missiles, hundreds of drones. Not only did we come to Israel's active defense for the first time ever, we brought other countries along to do that, including countries in the region. And Israel now sees powerfully what it stands to gain from greater integration in the region, including in a common security architecture. All can see that this is a way to effectively isolate the troublemaker in the region, Iran. So all of that is there, all of that is possible, and I think for the incoming administration, it'll be important to continue to show, here's one path, and what can be achieved by following that path. And then there's another, which is perpetual violence, destruction, terrorism, despair for people. That's the choice. I think we've now put in place and done the work that handing it off can be used to build a strong foundation and move down that much more positive path.
Leon.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Secretary. Thank you for your service. Thank you for doing this. I trust you're not going to miss the million of miles that you've done in the last 4 years, and that you're happy to finally see your children. I wanted to ask you on Gaza, of course. You mentioned a tremendous relief in the region, both with Palestinians and Israel. There seems to be uncertainty for the ceasefire, and it was announced yesterday, and it's supposed to be implemented on Sunday. That's 4 days, quite a long time. Israel has led new strikes upon Gaza today or overnight. How confident are you that this ceasefire is actually going to happen? And if I may, just a broader question, or after the 4 years, or your 4 years and now that your tenure is coming up, what is your proudest accomplishment in these 4 years, and what is your biggest disappointment?
So on the ceasefire, yes, I am confident, and I fully expect that implementation will begin, as we said, on Sunday. Look, it's not exactly surprising that in a process, in a negotiation that has been this challenging and this fraught, you may get a loose end. We're tying up that loose end as we speak. I've been on the phone in one way or another all morning with Brett McGurk, with our Qatari friends, and I'm very confident that this is moving forward, and we'll see the start of implementation of the agreement on Sunday. In terms of my own tenure and what I take from it, and I think there'll be plenty of opportunity to reflect on that in the weeks and months ahead. Look, in terms of satisfaction, as I said at the outset, we came in knowing that we had to reset the foundation for American diplomacy and American foreign policy. And resetting that foundation meant, as I've said, re-engaging, rejuvenating, reimagining these alliances and partnerships. It's the greatest strength that we bring to virtually every issue we have to tackle around the world. These voluntary partnerships and alliances that have stood us in such good stead over so many years, and I think are vital to effectively operating in this more complicated, this more contested, this more combustible world. And that's exactly what we did. But the point is not doing that for the sake of doing it. The point is doing it for the sake of more effectively dealing with the world we're operating in, and I think we've demonstrated that. When Ukraine was attacked by Russia, because of the investments that we'd made in our partnerships and our alliances, we were able to bring together 50 countries, keep them together, and marshal their focus and their resources on helping to defend Ukraine. And we've done that very successfully. And we've done that in a way where many other countries picked up the burden. When it comes to maybe the biggest systemic challenge that we face in the international system, and that is China and the capacity that it has, uniquely, whether it's militarily, whether it's economically, whether it's diplomatically, to reshape the international order, what we've been able to do through these stronger alliances and partnerships is to focus other countries in ways that we haven't seen before on how to deal effectively with the challenges posed by China. We have much greater convergence between us and partners in Europe, between us and partners in Asia, among all of us in confronting these challenges. And I listed a few areas in which we're working much more closely together. And as I've said before, when you bring just the United States to the table, well, we have a lot of weight, but when it comes to economic issues, for example, where China's engaged in unfair practices, where it's engaged in overcapacity to try to drown our industries, our communities, our workers with their products. Well, when we're taking that on and we're doing it alone, we're 20% of world GDP. When we're doing that in concert with allies and partners across Europe and Asia who are similarly aggrieved by these practices, well, we're 50-60% of world GDP, and it's a lot more effective in getting China to change its conduct. So those are just two ways in which we've used this investment in our allies and partners to get real results, to tackle real problems, to meet real challenges. And again, through so many of the issues that are affecting the lives of our people, we brought countries together in a way that's going to have a material impact on making things better. I mentioned earlier the coalition we built on synthetic opioids, on fentanyl. You've heard me say this before. The number one killer of Americans aged 18 to 45 is fentanyl. And it's by definition a problem that has to be tackled cooperatively with other countries, because the ingredients that go into making it may be made halfway around the world, they come close to our borders, they get synthesized into fentanyl, they come into the United States, they kill people. So the fact that we brought all of these countries together, now working in close concert to deal with this problem, that's going to have a material benefit on the lives of the American people. In these ways and so many more, what I take satisfaction is that we now can approach each of these problems from a position of much greater strength, much greater effectiveness. Disappointments? Yeah, of course. There are always many. There's always the things that you didn't get done. There's always the coulda, woulda, shoulda that you ask yourself. But I think it's also important to take a minute and take stock of what we actually have done, what the men and women of this department have achieved. Would I have wished Do I wish we could have gotten the ceasefire agreement months ago? Of course. The suffering since, the lives lost since? Sure. Could have been avoided if we'd gotten this over the line sooner. But in something as complex, as complicated, where different events have intervened and the work that we had done, the progress we were making toward bringing it to conclusion was delayed or derailed, as the President again said yesterday, almost every time you're trying to deal with something this hard, and as George Mitchell put it so well in the context of Northern Ireland peace, you're going to have many, many days of setback and struggle before you get to that final day of success. But every one of those days of setback and struggle is necessary to get you to the day of success.
Daphne.
Thank you for your service and thank you for taking our questions over the last 4 years. Since the Gaza war erupted, there's been a flood of reports supporting videos and evidence of potential IHL violations by Israel, and yet your department has refrained from making a definitive assessment. There's a sense out there that you gave Israel a pass on this issue and that that's part of the administration's legacy. Is there any chance you will deliver a definitive assessment on this in your final days? And if I may, on another region, we're reporting that the U.S. will impose sanctions on Sudan's Burhan today. Could you confirm whether the administration will take that step, and why do this now, and why wait till now?
Okay. Thank you. We and I take very seriously the work that we do, and we have a responsibility to do, to assess in any place whether violations of international humanitarian law are occurring, war crimes, other abuses of international law, international norms, international practice. And that's what we continue to do every day, whether it's in the Middle East, Gaza, or in many other places around the world. And I'll come to that because your question about Sudan goes there as well. In Gaza, we faced a uniquely challenging situation in trying to make final determinations. Because uniquely in Gaza, besides having a population that's been trapped there, that has nowhere else to go, you have an enemy that embeds itself in and among civilians. Houses, hospitals, mosques, schools, and getting a clear picture and a clear understanding of whether any one incident in that context constitutes a violation of international law in one way or another is an incredibly complicated thing to do, especially to do in real time. So we continue to gather the information, we continue to assess it. If we have any conclusions that we can draw in the time that remains, we will. I'd also point out that in Israel itself, there are hundreds of cases that are being investigated. They have a process, they have procedures, they have rule of law, and we also look to them to carry out that process, to carry out the rule of law themselves. That's the hallmark of any democracy. We have reported in a number of ways on what we've seen, including in the NSM report. We've taken actions in a variety of ways in a variety of places. To Sudan. You know the actions we took in the direction of the RSF just a few days ago. The SAF has also committed war crimes, and it continues to target civilians. It's obstructed the advancement of peace process. It's refused to participate on numerous occasions in ceasefire talks that we've sought to convene. And together with the RSF, it's caused what is the world's worst humanitarian crisis that people are suffering through every day. And we believe strongly, as we said, there's no military solution to this conflict. So we have to see two things. We have to see the effective provision of humanitarian assistance to people who need it, We've been working very hard on that. We've seen some progress, but not nearly enough. And we have to see the end of the firing, the end of this conflict. And there we've seen virtually no progress. So in this situation, we're able much more clearly to account for actions that are taken. There's no ambiguity about the environment in which both sides are operating and what the results of the actions that they've taken actually are, both in terms of the horrific consequences for human life and what that means under our law and under international law.
Michelle?
Follow up on that, thank you. Is the RSF and Burhan, are they equally responsible for mass atrocities? And are these sanctions a sign of a failure of diplomacy? And then real quickly on the Middle East, how would you describe your dealings these past 15 months with Netanyahu?
So on the RSF and the SAF, the actions we took on the RSF, as you know, had a determination of genocide. The actions that we're looking at for the SAF go to war crimes, so there are gradations in these things, and we follow the law. We look at the criteria. We look at this intensely with our lawyers, with our experts, in order to make these determinations, guided, as I said, by the criteria. The end result is, one way or another, people are suffering grievously in Sudan. It is, again, the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. And we have been deeply engaged with our diplomacy to try to bring it to an end. We haven't, to date. But as I've said, part of our challenge in any of these situations is to keep working through it, to keep pushing, to keep pressing, to get to that one day of success. It is, for me, yes, another real regret that when it comes to Sudan, we haven't been able on our watch to get to that day of success. As I said, some improvements in getting humanitarian assistance in through our diplomacy, but not an end to the conflict, not an end to the abuses, not an end to the suffering of people. We'll keep working it for the next 3 days, and I hope the next administration will take that on as well. On the last 15 months, look, one of the things I think is really important is, as a general matter, to focus less on personalities and on people and more on policies. And what is it that we can do? What is it we should do to affect those policies? And so what we've been in a way that accomplished 3 basic things. One, of course, to try to ensure that October 7th could never happen again, and to make good on our commitment to Israel's security. 2, to prevent a wider war, a broader conflict that drew in more countries, more groups, both because that would bring even more death and destruction, and because it was exactly what Hamas was looking for: get that wider war, be able to have others attacking Israel, and to allow Hamas to continue to do what it was doing. And third, of course, was to try to do right by the people who were caught in the middle of this crossfire that Hamas initiated: the children, the women, the men of Gaza, with better protection for them, with more assistance for them. And that's what we've been focused on these 15 months. None of that changes what's happened, but it has put us now in a position where there is the real possibility for moving this to a better place. The immediate possibility, more than possibility, now the immediate reality of finally moving Gaza to a better place, finally getting hostages home, finally getting relief that people need, finally having an opportunity to have an enduring ceasefire, but also, as I was talking about with Matt before, in the region, as a result of the extraordinary setbacks that all of these actors who are responsible for the death, the carnage, the inability to make progress, the setbacks that they've encountered, whether it's Iran, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Hamas.
Right, that was the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken from the Washington, D.C., speaking about the features of the U.S. foreign policy during the past period. The U.S. Secretary of State said that there are horizons of promising opportunities for the Middle East, particularly after reaching the ceasefire. He stressed the importance of implementing this ceasefire, expressing his deep appreciation for Egypt and Qatar and the role and efforts exerted in reaching this ceasefire. He also emphasized the strength of the U.S. Policy, noting that they are expecting the ceasefire to go into effect by next Sunday, and that all the final obstacles were resolved. Blinken also spoke about the enemies of the U.S. and that they were weakened during the Biden administration, noting that they were able to confront the economic repercussions of the coronavirus. Blinken also stressed the importance of supporting Ukraine to weaken Russia, noting that sanctions imposed on Russia had already weakened the Russian stance. Blinken also spoke about a decreased European dependence on Russia's gas, noting that the U.S. transatlantic relations with Europe are extremely important for the U.S. National security. And he also spoke about the U.S. ability to manage the competitiveness between the U.S. and China. Finally, he spoke about Sudan as the worst humanitarian crisis that existed in the modern life, and spoke about the importance of finding a military solution for this crisis, end the bloodshed and end the suffering of people. These were the main important features of the U.S. policy in which the U.S. Secretary of State Blinken spoke about. Definitely also emphasized the continued importance of supporting Ukraine, and at this upcoming stage he highlighted the promising prospects for the Middle East following this recent ceasefire agreement, and reiterated that U.S. supports for Ukraine must persist. He expressed confidence that the ceasefire agreement in Gaza would be implemented, as we said previously, on Sunday, and reflected a broader geopolitical trends. He remarked that U.S. adversaries, particularly Russia, have been weakened by the end of President Biden's terms. Blinken also underscored the strength of the American diplomacy, pointing the Gaza deal, or pointing out to the Gaza deal as an evidence of its strength, and stressed the importance of managing the competitiveness with China in a responsible way. These were the main important features of the U.S. diplomacy during the past period, or during the administration, or the Biden administration. He also acknowledged that steps were taken by President Biden to address the economic crisis triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. These were also the main headlines and features of this live broadcast from the Washington, D.C. by the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken.